Coming up, I'm going to share with you my spoiler-free thoughts on the new motion picture, The Green Knight, coming, well, pretty much now from A24 and director David Lowery. Let's get to it. Hi, everybody. I'm Lee, and welcome to Grimmleigh's Fiends. If this is our first time meeting, welcome to the channel. It's great to have you here. I'm a writer, sculptor, and illustrator with a, shall we call it, healthy fixation on things that go bump in the night, whether they be ghosts, goblins, your traditional mythological creatures, monsters, and other oddities. And this week, I had the privilege of watching the new movie, The Green Knight, from A24 and director David Lowery, starring Dev Patel. The movie chronicles the quest to knighthood for Sir Gawain, who is a pretty prominent figure in Arthurian legend. And there's a little bit of deviation from the source material, but that's fine. The movie itself is breathtaking. I am a huge fan of the source material. The story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is one that has permeated my being for a good part of my adult life. I first read the story when I was a teenager, and I've reapproached it about every decade since then. And what I found most interesting about it is how much the story itself changes as I've gotten older. The story of Gawain and the Green Knight is essentially the story of a young person trying to find his way with honor, what his word means, what having a code of ethics means, what following through with something means. And honor is such a vague, ambiguous thing for us right now. But in the past, especially during the period of time that the original Gawain and the Green Knight was written in the 1400s, honor might have been one of the best ways to encourage somebody, say a plowhand or a farmer's kid, or somebody who was working as a serf on their lord's land. They weren't going to actually benefit from getting involved in a king's war or a baron's war or going on a crusade. They weren't going to make any money. And if they did, most likely that would end up going to whatever landowner they were indentured to. So honor would be something that you could use as an impetus to cause people to want to go on a crusade, to want to do right by king and country. So you could almost say, from the perspective that the original story was written, it was almost a call to nationalism, because people who were having it read to them, or people who were telling the story, were most likely trying to encourage people to rise up and to be better than their base nature would be. Now, David Lowery did some amazing things with this movie. He plays with texture in a way that I have not seen from many directors. The color wheel is his best friend throughout this movie. There is so much color, it almost hurts your eyes. And there are some interesting plays with color and contrast here that I found really fascinating. For a movie about a Green Knight, the color itself is underrepresented in a huge way. It's almost like you find yourself yearning for green because you've programmed yourself to think about green in anticipation of the main character. So when green does hit you, it washes over you in a way that's almost startling. And a lot of that has to do with the work of the cinematographer. His name is Andrew Draws Palmero. And the saturation of certain colors at the absence of others is just startling. It's stunning. There is a lot of the color orange in this, and in other reviews and conversations I've had with people, I really get caught up in the color theory that's at work throughout this movie. Now, I've incorrectly said that orange is a perfect contrast to green. That's not actually technically true. It can be a good contrast to green, but it's typically a good contrast to purple. Your purple and indigo tones are also just thoroughly saturated throughout this movie. And it gets into things, as I'll show here in just a moment, with some of the characters that are, shall we say, less than lovely in their representation, such as King Arthur and Lady Guinevere. The characters are older, and if you really follow your Arthurian legend, you can see that Arthur is sick. This is the decline of the Arthurian throne, and the bags under his eyes are just a glorious thing to behold. Guinevere is stunning in her beauty, but you can tell that it's a beauty that is in its twilight. It's waning. She has bags under her eyes that are lit in such a way that you can get lost in them. The purples, the bruising, the just matted texture of skin tones in this movie is absolutely stunning. Now, that's just some of the characters. That's just some of the secondary and tertiary characters throughout the story. There's so much going on in Merlin's face, even though he's never named. You know it's Merlin. He's got runes all over his face. But where this movie really gets me going and gets me excited is when the titular character shows up. The Green Knight is a wonder of design, not just character design, but sound design. When the Green Knight first shows up, I'm not spoiling anything here. If you're an English major in college, you've probably read The Green Knight, or at least some version of The Green Knight, but it's also a pretty prominent feature in the trailers. The Green Knight shows up at the bidding of Morgan Le Fay. In the original stories, he shows up because Morgan Le Fay hates Guinevere with such a passion. She'll do anything to scare her, to frighten her, or in this case, to ruin her New Year's feast. So the Green Knight shows up, and in the movie, he's just staggering. You can tell he's humongous. You can tell that he's just massive. And the character design here, he's covered in vines and oak and wood. His face is a mask of wooden features. And as he moves, this is where the sound design becomes so incredible. He sounds like creaking oak. He sounds like wood and timbers that are creaking under the strain of their own movement. And the horse's footsteps are thunderous. They echo throughout the hall in a way that just conveys so much mass and menace. And here's what's great about it. It's not menace like, oh, this guy is terrifying, he's a scary monster. It's, oh, this guy is a force of nature. He is nature itself manifest, and he is here to deliver a challenge. And the challenge is great. This is straight out of the books. He is there to challenge Arthur's bravest knight to deliver a blow unto him. In exchange, in 1 year's time, that champion will travel north to his chapel, the Green Chapel, where that blow will be returned in kind. So Gawain, who's a new knight in the stories, decides he's going to show his uncle Arthur the king what he's made of. And that's where the story gets very interesting to me, because those themes of honor come into play here in a huge way. He has pretty much spent his life being the king's nephew. He spends all of his time with his girlfriend Essel. He spends a lot of his time in brothels. He's constantly drunk. He really hasn't done anything with his life. And Arthur wants to know something of him, and there's nothing really to tell. So he's keen to show Arthur what he's made of. And he takes up a weapon and strikes the Green Knight's head from his shoulders. Now, I've talked about this on this channel. I've talked about this quite a bit on the Geek Show podcast. And it's also just a main feature of the story. Now, beheading stories were a big part of early medieval literature. For some reason, folks thought that a beheading game was a funny trope in their literature at the time. So this wasn't uncommon for the 1400s, but the way it plays out is fantastic. The passage of time that's conveyed from that point forward is just breathtaking. There's a short montage showing the passage of time. Again, this is in the trailer a little bit. You see the Punch and Judy show that's going, and this almost calendar wheel of paintings that's going by showing the passage of the seasons. And Gawain is doing what Gawain does. He's not really preparing for the quest. He's just doing the drinking, the womanizing, the procrastinating. And that's another deviation from the source material. In the source, Gawain does prepare, and his honor is not a thing that allows him to hold off on this quest. He's going to go. He's going to face the Green Knight and accept that blow in return. And this, he's a little reticent to take off. And I'm not going to go into any more spoiler detail with that, but where Gawain's quest goes from there is, again, and I'm going to say this over and over and over again, it's breathtaking. There are things that happen on this quest that I was not expecting. That's where the story took an interesting turn for me. I was expecting this chivalric romance, which it says it is right from the very beginning. It's the classic chivalric romance of medieval times. And it is that. There is a romantic essence to the story. But that romance is not necessarily what you would call traditional romance. It's a romance of yearning. It's a romance of haunting. And it's a haunting of what honor means to you. And it's a haunting of what an absence of honor could mean to you. And Gawain is an interesting character because from a say virtuous standpoint in this movie, he's not a virtuous person, but from a person who does the right things standpoint, he is the most virtuous. He is naive, he's gentle, he will do the right thing, and that is shown so well. Dev Patel is phenomenal in this movie. His gentleness, his humanness is so there. It's so raw. It radiates off of him. But there's also this indecisive quality to him that I found fascinating, because what an incredible juxtaposition of nature that you have there. You have an indecisive knight who will do the right thing. He's not sure what to do with his life. He's looking for the story of his own personal glory, the representation of his honor, and he doesn't know how to do that. And yet, in the doing of the quest, he finds that, and that in itself is a wonderful thing to watch. There are supernatural elements to this outside of the Green Knight, which I found amazing to see. And it's not your large Marge jump scare stuff. It's gentle, and it takes its time in the telling, and I love that. And that's kind of where my concern comes in for this movie, because in the grand scheme of things, in this era of distraction, this movie is one that demands your attention. You can't come into David Lowery's Green Knight and expect to keep up with your Instagram stories. You can't go in with distraction, because this movie has a ponderous purpose. It is pondering a great many things. There is a lot of weight and gravity to the story that is being told. And with that comes a necessity to invest all of your attention to the screen. There is so much going on there. And the performances themselves are so incredibly subtle that you could miss something. And it would be especially a shame to miss the performance of Alicia Vikander, who plays multiple parts throughout the movie. She has a monologue towards the film's climax that is, how to put this lightly, the single most sinister thing I think I've ever heard in that setting or from that type of character. It's breathtaking. I'm saying that word a lot today, but it's just how I felt about this movie. It is an incredible performance that could have been just phoned in by just about anybody else, but Vikander rises to the occasion, and she and Dev Patel have some incredibly intense scenes. And that's kind of how this movie goes. For something that's as long and ponderous as it is, it's also incredibly intense. There are moments of sheer beauty that have an abstract horror in the middle of it. There is music that is, in one way, very historically accurate. There's a lot of chamber music, there's a lot of chanting, there's a lot of aural chaos going on with it, though. So while you're hearing this music that may actually be somewhat accurate for the period, there's a intensity to it that can make the movie more unsettling than it already is. And that gets me back to that theme of haunting that permeates the entire movie. I would really recommend that if you are a fan of art, if you are a fan of an artist showing what they're capable of doing and just displaying their soul and just laying it out for you, this movie is for you. If you're a person who has a hard time with distraction, this movie is probably one that you're going to want to pass on. This may be a movie that will bother you. You may find it boring, and that would be sad, because this is something that I think is best digested like a long meal. Take your time with it. Maybe pick at the edges a little bit and let it wash over you, because there's so much going on there. There's so much substance there, and it takes its time in getting there. Now, there are a couple of missteps, in my opinion. These are things that would detract overall from your average film goer's enjoyment of the movie. One, some of the accents are a little hard to muddle through. So this movie may do better on home release, where you could turn the subtitles on. You get these thick Welsh accents, and it might be a little hard to follow along. Now, the main characters, that's never really an issue. You can hear what they're saying. You know exactly what's going on. But for some of the secondary characters, that may be a bit of a challenge. The other issue that comes up, and this is an interesting gripe because I've heard it from multiple people, is that the movie relies on Old English calligraphy to do some title cards. And I thought that was a neat vehicle to convey a message or to set a scene. But if you're not familiar with Old English lettering, it can be a little difficult to take in what's being said on the screen. But regardless, those are two very minor gripes, and one warning about the pacing and the timing in the face of a daunting masterpiece of a movie. It is gripping. It's absolutely beautiful to watch. And there are some scenes that in a lesser film or in the hands of a lesser creator would have been howlingly funny. And instead, they're just kind of sinisterly chuckleful, if that makes any sense. So check it out if you have the time and the will. The Green Knight with David Lowery and A24. Now, if you're interested in more of the story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, you can check out some amazing resources. I do have some links to these books in the information section below, but just a little disclaimer here. Those are affiliate links, so if you do purchase any of those books, I will receive a small commission, which of course we'll be using to support this channel. First book you'd want to check out is J.R.R. Tolkien's adaptation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. It's a translation, and he considered it to be his exploration of the original Old English story. He considered it to be a major inspiration in how he became a writer. So that's a fantastic source to read. And of course, the official adaptation that has been released from A24. This is the Bernard O'Donoghue translation of the story. It has a pretty good foreword from David Lowery about why he was inspired to do the story in the first place. Those are really, really good adaptations. And again, you can find some links to those stories below. And then Howard Pyle wrote King Arthur and His Knights, which is a really great collection of the Arthurian Legends stories. And the last part of it is actually all about Sir Gawain and how he was portrayed throughout medieval literature. It's interesting seeing that contrast between how Gawain was portrayed in this movie compared to how he's a celibate knight of great virtue who champions women and the weak, who has the Blessed Virgin Mary painted on his shield, which I love they actually included in this movie. So great little details like that if you're a fan of the source material. That's it for this review of The Green Knight. I hope that if you got a chance to see it, you get out there and check it out. I'd love to hear what you think of the movie. Let's have a conversation in the comments section. If you liked the movie, if you didn't like the movie, if there's something you would have loved to see differently, and what you just thought overall of The Green Knight as a monster. He's a fantastic creature and a fantastic execution of a character that could have been done so incredibly differently, and instead you get this sinister yet noble character that's just brought to incredible life on screen here. If you like what we're doing, please like and subscribe. We're going to keep presenting all kinds of monstrous content, whether it's my own creations, like the story of Iope. She's a forest princess who takes in a little bit more than she expected in an afternoon in the haunted woods. We'll also be taking a look at some classic mythology and creatures that have appeared throughout human civilization. Thanks so much for being part of the channel, everybody. The best is yet to come.